Well, hi, everybody.
Hi.
So all the greatest revolutions happen in basements. So tonight is the moth revolution. I appreciate you all coming. Tonight I'm presenting Moth Mystique, illuminating the dark side of winged wonders. So I love moths. Matthew loves moths. Chelsea loves moths. Do we have any other moth lovers here? Okay, good. I see some people. It's okay to be honest because my goal is to get you all excited. So I'm actually a conservation photographer. I'm not a biologist or a scientist, so I learn as I go. I've only been mothing for a few years, but if you thought birding was cool, you should moth, right? Mothing is like the rock and roll version of birding. And so tonight I'm hoping you will join me on the dark side and explore the exciting world of moths. And to start the presentation, we have a gateway moth for people, the rosy maple moth, which I believe is the smallest member of the silk moth family here in the United States of America.
Chelsea, can you show us your t-shirt? That has a
Oh yeah, Chelsea Beat has made some amazing rosy maple moth shirts to benefit their wonderful organization. Chelsea is an amazing environmental artist. She has wood frogs and salamanders and now rosy maple. Next she's gonna do a fisher cat and a porcupine, right? She seems to somehow do all of my favorites. So during this presentation, we are going to discover the significance of moths in our ecosystem. We're going to learn the basics of mothing to observe moths in your own backyard. We're going to explore how all of us can contribute to moth conservation. And you'll also see a lot of moth photos sprinkled throughout, taken by yours truly. And my evil plan is to really get you all excited about moths. You know, they're so super cool. And I want to show you all that they're not just after your sweaters. So you might be wondering, why do moths matter? Well, just look at that. They're incredibly awesome. This is a small-eyed sphinx moth spotted in my yard. I just love moths because they come in a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes and sizes, and they also look really good when they get stuck in my hair.
How do you like that?
That is with a handheld flash and a macro lens. So this was taken at night. And what I found, what's really interesting, if you do flash photography with a lot of these moths, their colors really shine and pop.
It's absolutely spectacular photo. You're great.
What? So I think it'd be good if the presentation was just, if you want to come up and say that. Because conservation photography is so hard. Thank you.
I'm going to keep thinking it, but it's wonderful.
You're absolutely right.
Oh, again, thanks for having me. I love Beat, and y'all are so cool. Thank you. And so, you know, why do moths really matter? Just, you know, we know that they're awesome and incredible, but they're actually a key food source for a lot of bats and birds. And it's estimated that 96% of all terrestrial bird species in North America feed insects to their young, with the majority being caterpillars of moths. So essentially, moths are the protein bars of the bird world. They serve as the main dietary source for bats when moths aren't jamming their sonar. And I'm not kidding. For example, the Luna moth's gorgeous tail spins and confuses the sonar of bats. So if you thought birds were cool, I mean, mothing's the new birding, you know? And so, you know, one thing that came out recently that's really, really incredible, that some hardcore mothers like Matthew might already know, but moths play an essential role in pollination. And I think as human beings, we overlook the misunderstood. That's why my husband doesn't talk to me half the time. I'm kidding. He's here. Let's hear it for my husband. Because sometimes I moth off the porch and he will come out to check on me, and there are millions of moths. So I have the greatest guy in the world. But moths play an essential role in pollination. And the University of Sussex in England recently did a study showing that moths may be more important pollinators than bees. So when you think of pollinators, think of the moths. They're working the night shift. And moths can be an indicator of the health of the environment and climate change. So this is another, and all these photos, when you look at the diversity of moths, these were all taken in my backyard. I live in the Catskill Mountains, and I'll talk about why I think they're there. But in a few, well, I don't want to jump ahead. I'm really excited to share part of it with you, but we'll get to it 2 hours from now. But you know, another reason why moths matter is they are absolutely adorable. This is a forest tent caterpillar moth. Up close, they have so much personality. And this moth was just hanging out in the grass, looking cute. So here are some magnificent moth facts. So do we want to try to say that 3 times fast? Magnificent moth facts, magnificent moth fact. I'm doing this alone, magnificent moth facts. So 1 in 10 described species of organisms on Earth are moths. What? Yeah, my mind's blown too. And did you know that moths outnumber butterflies 9-1? Right? So, and it's estimated there's an astonishing 150,000 to over 500,000 species of moths, and only 19,500 species of organisms that we call butterflies. And this recently came out. Butterflies are now classified by scientists as day-flying moths. They genetically sequenced a bunch of moths at Florida University, where they study moths at the Carahara lab. And basically, moths are butterflies, and butterflies are moths. Actually, they think that, from what I have read and my understanding, that moths developed in North and Central America, that butterflies developed from them. But I just got your joke 2 seconds later. Which came first? Always moths. Next time you're partying and you have a margarita, raise your glass to moths, because also at the University of Florida, they figured out through their research that the worm at the bottom of a tequila bottle is actually a moth caterpillar. So as you can see, moths have been giving us great things without us even knowing. The world might collapse without them. They also serve as environmental sentinels. Their population and diversity are crucial indicators of environmental health and the impacts of climate change. And sadly, moth populations are declining. Scientists are still debating the causes, but it's likely that human-induced environmental changes are the cause, and climate change from droughts, wildfires, warmer winters, and light pollution are contributing significantly to moth declines. And unfortunately, the disappearance of moths is predicted to have a significant cascading effect that will lead to major losses of plants and animals that rely on them. If you think about, if baby birds mainly eat caterpillars of moths and bats, I mean, if you like birds, it's time to start appreciating the moths. That's the depressing part. We'll get to better stuff. So this is an angel moth. It's called the angel. And again, I'm not a scientist or a biologist, and if anyone could answer this for me, I would love it. If you're watching online, hello, World Wide Web. And the crowd here, we have a massive moth crowd here, you all. It's amazing. And, you know, this is called the angel. And I was kind of blown by seeing this moth. My mind was blown because their main host are ash trees. And where I live near Woodstock. All the ash trees are dead. I've never, I lived in Catskills about 8 years. I've never seen an actual ash tree except in other places. I'll see little saplings, but I even have a dead ash tree in my backyard that I'm leaving standing because, as you know, dead trees are good for wildlife. It may fall on the house, but at least I know I did a good thing. But they also like lilac. We have a giant Japanese lilac tree in our front yard that came with the house. So I don't know if it's feeding off a lilac, but if you look on iNaturalist in all of New York, they are very rarely reported. So I'm wondering if it's a coincidence if this population of angel moths, if there's fewer because of less ash trees. So you're probably wondering, what can we do to help? And I personally believe we can help by observing moths and cultivate moth-friendly habitats, because I think a lot can be said. There's kooky people like me and my friend in the crowd that will moth every night, and we see stuff. And, you know, that's kind of an advantage to pin specimens at universities and stuff like that, in museums, because we're seeing on the ground the changes. I have moth friends that I talk to and will say, hey, we saw more of these last year, this year. For example, last year I had so many rosy maple moths in my yard, and this year I haven't seen one. I don't know why, but I haven't. So this is a moth sheet in my yard. This is a wave sphinx moth, and this is a close-up shooting from below. And when I took this photo, I'll never forget this. It was a very humid night, and I'm standing there underneath the light taking a photo. I've never had so many moths in my hair. It was a fun time. And you've got some beetles. It's so much fun to do this, because what blows my mind is that all this stuff is in my surroundings, you know? And then it gets kind of creepy, because are all these creatures watching all day? So we're going to go over the basics of mothing so y'all can get to mothing. And really, mothing is just observing, admiring, and studying moths, most often at night, but there are day-flying moths. And so I really want to inspire everyone watching to join the moth mafia. You know, you can really start mothing with simple tools. All you need is enthusiasm, a warm and dry night, a safe and dry area for moths to land, a light source, and optional, this is what fancy mothers do. They'll make a homemade fermented moth bait, which is also called sugaring. That's what the hip kids call it. You paint it on the tree, and it's a stinky mixture with brown sugar, beer, rotten fruit, and molasses. I have a friend that has a secret ingredient, but that's up for him to share, to his secret moth concoction. Or lately, I've been enjoying mothing the natural way, which is just looking for moths amongst the plants during the day or at night. So this is a patent pending technique called the porch light technique for mothing. I'm thinking about pitching it to Shark Tank, but mothing can be as easy as turning on your porch light. And this is a one-spotted variant moth. And so often just an outside light on your house can serve as a gateway to mothing. So let's go over the tools of mothing. Again, you need a light source, but you have all these choices. You can use your porch light, my favorite, which is just a black light from the hardware store, or you can get really fancy with a mercury vapor bulb, which is my dream. I don't have one of those yet. And there's other options as well. Moths are attracted to certain wavelengths of light. I'm sure we have all heard like a moth to a flame. And you really do need to set up a landing pad, which would be a dry and safe surface for the moths to land on. This could be your sheet, a towel, an old t-shirt, or like I like to sometimes do, the outside of my house. You know, it's very easy to point a light at a wall on the outside of your house or your garage door, or what I do on my porch, I hang a sheet from the railing on my porch, clip a light on it, boom, done, moth town. So then you need to really organize your gear. So depending on your technique, if you want to be really, really easy with stuff, just turn your porch light on. But if you're using a sheet, you'll need something to hang it from. You could hang it from a tree branch, but it's really better if you're more mindful of a setup. So what I like to do is use a backdrop frame, clamps, clamp lights, and extension cord. So you can get mothing for sometimes under 50 bucks with all that. Even cheaper if you just go into your basement or just gather things from around the house. So this really shows the technique that I use. This is the sheet. Moths really like 600 thread count Egyptian sheets. That's a black light. These are about $8. And I found them to be incredibly effective for mothing. It's a clamp light, and then I'm a photographer, so I already have a backdrop frame, but I think this was about like 30 bucks. If you do this route, make sure to weigh it down on the bottom. I will use tent stakes, bricks, because it's not fun to have the moth sheet fall on you or have some casualties of mothing. This is one of my absolute favorite moth books to use. I look in this thing every single night. I love it so much. So there's additional tools that you can use. I have a giant embarrassing headlamp that I love, and it's got a red light and it's got a white light. You can use a flashlight. Identification aids, because I'm still learning, are very important for me. I've learned so much by iNaturalist and Seek. Those are my favorites. Online groups and the World Wide Web. You can find other moth people. I have a group of moth friends and we text each other with our moth finds and help with IDs, especially me. Old-fashioned field guides. And if you're taking photos, a smartphone, camera, macro lens, flash, it's up to you. And a lot of creativity and patience, because you would be surprised that sometimes they're pretty tricky to photograph and to make things interesting on a sheet. So this is me mothing in my backyard with the setup, with the frame. I'm lucky to have that view in my yard, and the Milky Way on some nights stretches over my house. And yeah, this was not a too busy night mothing wise, but I included this photo because you can really see the setup I'm doing. So I have the extension cord, I got my hair fluff so I look fly for the moths, I've got my flashlight, 3 black lights, and a beautiful view to look at. So this is kind of new on the scene that I'd like to talk about. Let's talk about the ethics of mothing. So when I moth, I want to prioritize their welfare. As a conservation photographer, I feel like anything we do in the wild world, we're going to make an impact. We're human beings, right? But how can we do these things with making as least impact as possible? And this is where thinking about moths, even though they're small, but if you think about it, our ecosystem may collapse without them. So we should really prioritize them. And so you really need to moth carefully and try to follow best practices. So timing wise, I always wait until it's really dark outside, because as we know, bats get going and do their rounds right at dusk. And I know they do it all night, but it seems they're most active at dusk. So I wait until it's really dark to start mothing, and this avoids bird and bats coming in for snacks. And it's really important when you are mothing, if you're drawing a lot of different insects to the sheet, to watch out for predators. I mean, you would not believe how smart spiders and wasps and toads, and sometimes I'm a little hungry, they're a lot smarter than you would think. So it's always good to be looking out for them. Weather considerations, don't moth on a rainy night. That's kind of a death sentence. If they get wet, it's not good. And the duration of mothing should be considered. You should really only moth for a few hours, because moths are really busy. They got to make our world go round. They got to pollinate and do their moth stuff. So this is an example at someone's house, and they have this very large floodlight, which you can see is good for drawing in moths. But if this person left this light on every night, all night, every night, I am guessing, again, not a scientist, but I'm guessing the moth population around her house would drop significantly, because these moths would just, it's kind of like if I drive past an ice cream stand, I have to stop. Like I passed like 5 Stewarts on the way here, and I'm like, I need peanut butter pandemonium. My husband's gonna have to take me after. I just need it. I can't keep passing these ice cream stores and not get it. Moths are the same thing with lights. You know, they see wavelengths of light and they're like, we need more lamp. We gotta hang around it. You know, so they're just gonna hang around there. Like if someone just continuously put ice cream in front of me, I would just, you can tell that's my dream one day. So it's really important for all of us to remember to turn off our outside lights when they're not in use, or put them on a motion sensor. Light pollution is a really big problem, and it also hurts other wildlife. So we have more ethics of mothing. I want to pioneer this field, you guys. Location, location, location. So for example, in my yard, if I did the sheet in the same spot every night, I bet anything, spiders and all they're really smart. And also you don't want to get those moths. Some of them only live for a week, and some of them don't even have mouth parts because they're just alive to breed, and that's it, which is pretty hardcore. But you need to rotate your location, especially if you're in a small area. So for me, sometimes I'll be on the front of my house and then I'll go in a different area. I'll skip nights. because you really want to encourage moths to do their business and discourage predators. Also, watch where you step. I know all of us have had accidents, but it's really good to be mindful of that. And then post-mothing etiquette. Don't leave your sheet up all night. When you're done, shake it. It releases moths back into the environment so they can get back to it, and turn the light off, because if you left the sheet up all night with the light on, it would be similar to the porch photo I showed you, and everybody be coming in for snacks at dawn. You know, it makes sense, right? And this is all ethics like anything. It's not black and white. There's gray area. It's a balancing act, but I really feel, because moths are so poorly studied and so little relatively is known about them, that the gains from mothing, the data, the observation, and the connection with nature really eclipse any drawbacks of mothing. For example, unregulated lighting like street and floodlights cause much more harm than running a moth sheet. So when I talked about mothing all natural, this is an example. Can you find the moth in this photo? You all found it? Okay, good. Oh gosh, I can't see. It's right here. So that's a unicorn prominent moth on a white pine. Their camouflage is incredible. And I just really love this moth because when you see it in the environment, I mean, its hat matches the lichen, its suit matches the bark. It's probably one of my favorite moths, because anything named a unicorn, I mean, that's pretty cool, right? So you really have to, if you're going to moth naturally, which is just sneaking around, looking at bark and leaves and things, your eyes really do have to adjust to a new way of seeing. Here's another example. Look at these leaves. Oh, wait a second. That's a moth. That's a red line panapoda moth, and I think it really looks like a leaf. And it's really cute. This is a moth too, you got no. This is a common lytrosis moth, and they just mimic wood grain so well. And I forgot the name of the fungus on the tree, but it looks like candy to me. I did try some, it was good. But this is an example of their incredible camouflage. So let's talk about how you can help. I'm convinced I have such a large variety, relatively, of moths in my yard, because I have really been mindful to start planting things specifically for moths. Like, I'm always ahead of the curve. You know, we're talking about bees and butterflies. Moths are the next big thing, trust me. So, you know, when you are planning a pollinator garden, think about moths, because it's really important. And it's estimated that 90% of moths have specialized host associations as caterpillars, often only feeding on one type of plant. And if you think about it, if you cultivate plants for moths, it's going to bring in more caterpillars, then you'll have more birds, you'll have more bats. I personally love bats, love birds. I love moths. So it kind of, when you do this, it just kind of helps everything. And it becomes nature's bird feeder. And I add to my native garden every year. And as a result, I've been able to gain insights into diverse life cycles and preferred host plants of moths. And as a result, I've watched the species uptick every year. And so I'm still learning with all of this, but so far, some of my favorite plants to attract moths for nectaring or as a host plant are viburnums, Joe Pye at night. I don't know, in my yard, there are so many moths on the Joe Pye. It's like, what? Everybody loves that. Bee balm, crazy for it. Yarrow, they're crazy for it. Anise hyssop is like, I love that plant. And then one that I'm really loving is evening primrose. That's probably my favorite moth plant. And don't forget, trees are really important for moths. We all know oaks are like one of the best things you can plant for all wildlife. But it's been said that around 470 species of moths go to oak trees. But even in my yard, I have a lot of white pines. I live in a coniferous forest, hemlocks and white pines. There's moths that love those trees as well. So when I talk about evening primrose, This is why I love it. This is one of my favorite moments of mothing, and I remember texting my moth friends about it. This is the evening primrose plant. The flowers only open at night, and it's the host for the primrose moth. And so it took a few years, and last summer I'm in my garden, and I saw this moth on the evening primrose, and I ran in at like 2 a.m. yelling at, saying to my husband, "Oh my God, there's an evening," and he's like, "Okay, cool," but I'm sleeping. But if you build it, they will come, and it does spread pretty aggressively, but I think it's a cool plant that I don't see a lot in my area, and I like things that are kind of creepy, and I think it's creepy that it closes during the day and then at night it's open because it's kind of the opposite of what a plant does. And I mean, I don't know, look at that moth, right? It looks like a piece of candy. And so this is pretty exciting. I saw this probably last week. This is a Nessus Sphinx caterpillar, and one of their hosts is evening primrose. I saw this little caterpillar on the evening primrose. I was like, who are you with that spike on your butt? And so, yeah, I've never seen the adult version of this in real life. They're a day flying moth, but fingers crossed that that dream comes true. I just realized how geeky I am when I said that. My dream is to see a day flying moth. So again, evening primrose and the primrose moth. So check out this crazy wacky stuff. Like I said, the evening primrose opens at night, and the primrose moth like gets in there and does its primrose stuff, and it's lazy or it's just smart. I like to imagine that it's lazy like me and it's just chilling. And then the flower closes around the primrose moth as the sun comes up. So this is one in a closed flower that I saw in my garden. Again, all these photos were taken in my backyard. And it's thought that they mimic the wilted evening primrose flower, which I've seen it, and it does. They do get kind of pink. But this is hands down one of my favorite moths, just because when I saw this, I was just like, holy cow, how cool is that? This is another, I don't know why, whenever I see this moth, I crack up. Sometimes I can't explain what I laugh at because it's called a mint-loving pyrusa moth. It loves mint, and it's really cute. This is on anise hyssop, which is a member of the mint family, but I was reading the other day that this isn't in the mint family that it likes. There's different mint families. So again, I love mothing because it makes my brain think about lots of things and learns and challenges me. But I'm going to watch this plant closely because I see them on this a lot. So they're nectaring. I want to think they're using it as a host. I don't know. But this plant is also, it's just like a moth magnet. At night, there are so many moths on it. It's wild. So look at this little Sesame Street Muppet. This is a milkweed tussock moth caterpillar. They love milkweed, and this is on some swamp milkweed pods. I love the way these caterpillars look, but it's just there munching away. And then this is a cultivar of yarrow, and this is a lesser maple spanworm moth nectaring on yarrow. That's a plant at night. No matter what night it is, you can go and look at it. There are moths on it drinking up. But its host is maple, birch, cherry, poplar, and more. So this is what I call my spark moth, my gateway moth. When I moved to the Catskills, I was at a nursery, and I saw one of these little guys fly by. I was like, did I have a stroke or am I hallucinating? What is going on? And the dude at the counter was like, oh yeah, that's like a hummingbird moth. Like, you know, I wasn't hip then. And I just couldn't believe it. And I bought so much bee balm because I was like, I want to see one of these. And sure enough, they're in my garden. Now I get the hummingbird clearwing and the snowberry clearwing. And they're a day flying moth. And they really mimic a hummingbird. And I have some a neon like nightgown that's really garish with like neon yellows and pinks. I'm sure you can imagine. And I remember I haven't seen them in my garden this year, but I'd go out in the morning with my coffee and they would fly up to it, and hearing the wings that close, it was really hard not to reach out and hug it, you know, but I'm hands off with wildlife. But I hope you all have seen this moth, and if you haven't, please look out for it, because for me, it's just an amazing adaptation and is an example of why I love nature so much. So the hummingbird clearwing, their caterpillars love viburnums, native coralberry, honeysuckles, and snowberry. And the snowberry clearwing moth surprisingly loves snowberry. And they also love bush honeysuckle. So this is really interesting. I added this like 10 minutes before I left because I'm like, y'all might like this. I often see the snowberry clearwings in my yard, and I was kind of wondering why, because I only have one coralberry that I planted. And this year we have so many invasive honeysuckles in the Catskills, and on the edge of my property, there were a ton. And this year I'm like, I'm taking y'all down. And I borrowed a chainsaw, and I was like, it only kicked back once or twice. I'm not allowed to use it anymore, but I'm cutting down these honeysuckles, and underneath it was this really weird honeysuckle. I'm like, what is that? And it had cute little twin flowers, and it is a northern bush honeysuckle that turns out to be a host plant for the snowberry clearwing moth. So I'm like, maybe that's why they're in my yard. How exciting are moths, you guys, right? Are we doing good?
Yes.
So with my photography, when I talk about conservation photography, people really want to, they're like, what is that? So for me, if I take a photo and if I don't share it with the world or try to help wildlife, it's kind of meaningless for me personally. For me, the impact happens after I take the image. So with moths in particular, I have tried to share the joy of mothing on with broad audiences. So there was a piece in Smithsonian Online a few years ago. Nat Geo gave that piece a shout out in their email newsletter. And then The Guardian in the UK did a big photo gallery on it, which I thought was really cool, because I'm like, we're taking this worldwide, y'all. So if you want to be part of the solution and empower moths, some things that you can do are create beneficial environments for moths, turn off your outside lights when they're not in use, inspire others to join the moth mafia. You can sign up afterwards if you'd like. I am starting a moth mafia. Some people are like, what does that mean? It means if you like butterflies, I'm gonna break your legs. It's really, really, really important to participate, document, and contribute. There's so much people don't know about moths. I saw one this season, and I looked it up in my book, and it said host plant unknown. So there's so many things we don't know about them. So my way of contributing is through photography and getting people pumped about moths. Some people submit to iNaturalist. And National Moth Week kicks off on Saturday, which is a yearly global event promoting moth appreciation, community science, and data collection. And Beat is going to do an event with an amazing mother, Matthew, next week. What's the date again? Exactly. The 29th.
It's a long week.
Yeah, it's a long week. Us moth folks are going to be very busy the coming week. So this is how you can find me. Again, I encourage you to join the dark side. This is my friend Henry. I don't know what species that is. And are there any questions? Does anyone have any questions on the World Wide Web or in the crowd or?
Yeah, we have a question on Zoom. Are LED low post lights harmful at night?
That is where I'm going to say I actually don't know. Do you have an answer for that?
What's the question again? Sorry.
Are LED low post lights harmful at night?
Not knowing. Oh, sorry. Not knowing off the top of my head what
wavelengths?
Then, just to be safe, turn them off.
Oh, they meant in their garden. Like they mean garden lights, probably. I thought they meant some type of mothing light I've never heard of. I like to overthink everything. I bet you they're talking about solar lights in their garden.
Solar lights, yes, I think we have them.
Yeah, and
I don't know if they're bright enough.
what he hasn't noticed is we only have one in the garden because he's not observant the way I am, and I've slowly removed them. There's only one left. Marriage is awesome.
They said yeah, solar lights.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I mean, for me personally, the more I get into wildlife, I like to have it as dark as possible. There's a house near me that has a floodlight on all night, and it drives me crazy when I go out, especially photograph, and it's far away. I can see light pollution from New York City and the view I showed you. I like to have things as dark as possible because you can see better and it's better for wildlife. But as far as the wavelengths and stuff, I actually don't know. I'm a genius, but I don't know everything. But great question. Yes, sir.
So we've noticed lately we have a huge population of moths behind our apartment,
Whoa, where do you live?
Pittsfield downtown,
Okay.
and day flying moths.
Whoa.
And they all seem to be attracted to our neighbor's car.
What?
Just fluttering around the car all day long, and it's not, the car hasn't been like, is not being like recently driven. I thought maybe it was like the heat or something from the engine.
Is there sap dripping on it by any chance?
What
Maybe.
color is it?
Oh, neon
It's a
pink?
grayish color, but it's not like a bright silvery gray. It's like sort of a darker gray. We can't really figure it out. She thinks that it's maybe past relatives coming to visit, which is maybe could be true. I
Right.
was wondering if we knew of any kind of scientific reason why we think.
Well, I did have a sad twist about the angel moth, but I didn't want to make everyone cry. That goes with that. My sister unfortunately passed away 2 years ago of cancer, and I saw that moth on the first birthday after her death, the angel moth. So, yeah, anyway, it could be dead relatives or ghosts or anything. I would check for sap. Tom, what do you think?
What brand is it? Maybe we should all buy them.
Yeah.
I'm
Or
really interested because there's tons of them.
do you know what kind they are?
They're like a little gray moth. We've had a couple of them on our back door. But
Does this person like butterflies? Because they could be part of the moth mafia.
maybe.
Mm.
She's a wildlife appreciator.
Whoa. Matthew, what do you think?
Pugs.
Pugs? Pug moths are cool. I don't know. That's a great question. That's the thing that's fascinating about moths. Like we just don't know. I bet you we could Google that
I did try Googling.
Yeah, and there's no.
I didn't get a definitive answer.
Did you ask Chat GPT?
No.
Lately, I've been asking Chat GPT moth questions, but it does like there is one little tiny like these micro moths seem to be very poorly studied, and I'll look in even really old books. I've got like 6 different moth books now, and you cannot find like any info. That's why it's really important that we all, and it's exciting too. Literally, an everyday person like me in my wacky blazer could make like an important discovery about moths. So that's why I think it's pretty exciting too. But I love that question. I would love to know if you find out, reach out and carlarhodes.com.
I'll let you know.
I love that. Yes, sir.
Do you know what the host plant for Luna moths is?
We have several.
Can you
hosts.
repeat that question?
Oh, someone's asking what the host plant is for Luna moths. I've read in this area it's white birch.
Also maple. There's a whole bunch of different
Right.
hardwood species
Yeah.
that the caterpillars. If you get the guide that Carla showed, the Seabrook Lucky,
It's great.
Eastern moths from North America, Eastern North America, fantastic. It gives identification and host plants as well. Just the best one. Mine is so dog-eared.
See, I like that you said that because today, right before I came here, it gave me a little boost of confidence. I was opening that book and I'm like, oh, the spine is all cracked and it's getting more, and that means I'm really a mother now. But that's so where I live, I only saw Luna moths for the first time in person this year. I actually saw 2 and I actually cried, and I took a video of it at like 1 a.m. and forgot that it was recording audio and sent it to a few friends, and it's me going, whoa, no way, a Luna moth, I can't believe it, holy bleep. Like I was so excited. It was like I was seeing a rock star, like Mick Jagger was walking down my road or something. I was just freaking out.
So how many moths are attracted to your fingernails? Bring them out in front.
Oh yeah, these?
Look at the colors. Look at the
Yeah.
Oh no, don't put the light on. Hold it. I need to see this.
I don't want the crowd to see me in the
Fingernails are
light.
glowing.
I look beautiful in the dark. Yeah, I don't know. You know, it's funny that you say that because I've noticed I like to explore at night with a UV flashlight a lot lately to see what fluoresces. And I've noticed sometimes if it makes something glow, even your shoe, that it will kind of attract stuff. So I do wonder now if I shine that on my finger, maybe I might get a nice micro moth. You had a question?
Yeah, looking at these moths up close, one thing that I noticed that is significantly different than most butterflies I've seen, besides that they all look like teddy bears, is that their antennae are kind of, they look like sort of like leaves or like fan blades. They're kind of wide. Do we know what the purpose of that is?
I'm feeling like Matthew wants to answer this, but I know this, but he can answer it too. We're in the moth mafia.
Distinguish moths from butterflies. Butterflies will have the clubbed antennae. So boom, there's a quick distinction there. And the moths will have different types of antennae. There's like pectinate and bipectinate. So if you see like a gypsy moth in flight right now, it's going to be a male and it's going to have the big feathered antennae. And the reason they have the feathered antennae is to pick up the hormones of the female. It's more surface area to detect it in the air. So they're like flying around like crazy looking for a female. And like the male lunas the same way. So when you have the big feathered antennae, it's always a male.
And we had a real population uptick of those this year, I think. I know for a while there, my sheet was just covered in all males. Did you see a female at all?
Oh, just on the trees.
Okay, so I didn't spot any in my area on the trees, but it was interesting. In the Moth Mafia, we were all texting, and it was like in Rhinebeck, where I'm at near Woodstock, I mean, just everywhere. And one day I was going to Target and all this stuff, and remember I was texting, they were flying around Target. I'm like, does everybody love Target? Like, what is going on? Like, but I read that their populations rise and drop, and there's some parasite or something that takes them down, like deflates them. But then again, I think that's probably an indicator of climate change as well, that they're going up and up, because I've heard there are other places, but I know they were brought over, right, from France, I think.
Europe, yeah.
Europe. Well, whenever I see them, they're wearing a beret and eating baguettes, so I thought they were from France. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Someone online is wondering, do you have any photo tips?
Oh, photo tips. I have so many. So the best camera is the one you have with you, and practice, 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 practice. I look at my moth photos from a few years ago, and they're so much better now. I think a lot of it is lighting and your lens. You could use all different lenses. I mean, my favorite is a macro, and I use a diffuse flash. And I think also for me, I always want the photos, I think about trying to capture the personality and communicate that. I feel like sometimes that's more important than getting a tack sharp photo. So I think just experimenting and getting out there. I will say that I've seen people smoke my photography with just little clip-ons on their smartphone with a macro lens. I mean, they're just incredible. I've seen people get amazing shots with that. I think they're like $30, and then you could just shine a flashlight and do that. I have a mirrorless though, and a macro lens, and I move a flash around to kind of look all twisty when I do it. But just get out there and experiment. I learn by failure. And when you get good at stuff, it's really exciting. So you had a question.
Are they all vegetarians?
Are they all vegetarians? I think so.
I think so. The only carnivorous butterfly I know of.
They drink blood.
That eats aphids,
Oh,
but that's it. I think they'll eat sap, nectar. Many of the adults don't feed.
Yeah.
They just live.
they don't have mouth parts. It's like a horror show. Like if you read about it, like imagine if you were like turning from a caterpillar into a moth and you wake up and you have no mouth. It's like a scary movie waiting to be made. I did read though, there was a moth in my yard this season that almost looked like it was wearing like a big crinoline skirt. I forgot the name of it. I almost put it in the presentation, but it messes with wasp. It deposits its caterpillars, its eggs on paper wasp nests, and they get, I got to tell you, I mean, because I didn't know what this was, and I'm like, damn, like you're taking some stuff down. So like a predatory moth, I think. No, I'm not lying. You guys look like them all.
I love that idea.
That they're doing, me too.
Yeah.
You had a question online, I think? Oh, I thought there was one. We got to fill the last 3 hours. So if there's. Yeah.
You mentioned a field guide a couple of times, the Peterson's guide. Is that the same one, Matthew, you were talking
Yeah.
about?
Sorry, the
with
Peterson's
houseplant?
Guide, yeah, by Seabrook Lefty.
Okay.
And there is this drop this spring, and I'm loving it. I don't know. It's called Gardening for Moths. It was published by Ohio University. It is so good. And it lists the moths and their plants and photos. I mean, it's got so many photos and so much data in it that I mean, I don't know. I want to know these people that made it because it's incredible. And I just feel like moths are about to have a very big moment. You guys can be like, we saw a moth presentation in a basement. It'll be like the Beatles at the Cavern Club, you know? And then you'll just see a media blitz on moths and you'll be like, this all started in a basement.
So I'll go again.
Yeah.
I've read that moths, certain species of moths can pick up the frequencies of the bat signals and will fold their wings and evade the bats. They take a lot of action. Have you ever seen any of that?
I actually, one night, so I've read a tiger moth can do that and Luna moth. Are there any others, Matthew?
That's, yeah.
Yeah, and one of them, apparently, if you hold up an echo meter, you can hear it click.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
We did that last
And
time.
I have an echo meter now because I'm trying to be the geekiest gal in all of Woodstock. But,
An echometer, what is that?
oh man, it's this thing. It makes me question reality because you listen to it and you can hear bats. It's insane.
Steps down the frequency to your audio range.
Right. That's the best way to explain it because like I sometimes get things and get excited and I don't even question how it works. But you're right, but you can hear that's how I found out there were so many bats in my yard because you can use it and the bats are like
So the moths are clicking also?
I think it's the tiger moth that
Yeah, there's like this back and forth an arms race
Yeah,
that's been
yeah.
going on for millions of years.
So they're trying to confuse the signal?
Do you know how the moths make that sound?
I think it's in their butt or their thorax
Somewhere in their thorax.
or their moth butt. I'm trying to make it, if I use big words, I get confused. So, but I know the Luna moth, they think that they're tails, that they spin the tails. You know, they have, like I have on Luna moth earrings and you can see the tails and they spin the tails and it confuses the bat signal. I did see once in my yard, it was crazy. I don't know what type of moth it was. And it's just flying at dusk. I sit in my garden a lot and I see it way above me, flying, flying, flying. And a bat goes, and the moth went, and I don't know what type of moth it was, but I was like, that's pretty wild. Yes,
Have you tried,
Tom Tining, everyone.
have you tried raising any?
Great question.
Can you
So,
repeat that question?
Tom Tining, who is amazing, who I can't wait to talk to more, who did an amazing vernal pool walk that I couldn't make it to, ask an amazing question. If I have raised any moths. So this year, I actually, on my spice bush, found a folded over leaf and I kind of looked in and there was a pupa. And I'm like, do you remember I was texting you all about this?
Sure.
There's like thousands of texts. And actually, he's the only person in the moth group. We need more members. I'm making it sound like it's this giant Slack channel or something, but it's just me and Matthew. And I wondered what it was. And years ago, I tried to raise some monarchs, but then recent data shows that you shouldn't because of OE, or maybe you can do 10 or whatever. But I had the butterfly cages, so I thought I'll put this spice bush clipping in water and see what happens. And I took a picture, reverse imaging, trying to identify it, seek eye naturalists. And I finally got down to, I'm like, is that one of those freaky skipper butterflies? Like, what is this? It didn't look like a moth pupa. A week later, a crocus geometer came out, and it was gorgeous, or a false crocus geometer. I've read you can only tell the difference by dissection. And it was pretty incredible, but I'd like to raise more. So if you can get me in on that. Yes.
What's OE?
OE is a disease. Tom will tell you.
What was the question?
What's OE?
We're raising butterflies.
With monarchs, it's a disease that monarchs get that spread.
I don't know that.
Yeah, and the caterpillars get sick and kind of die. That spreads throughout populations, and it's thought that sometimes if you're raising too many in a small area, they can have it. But I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it in my garden though, and what I have in my garden, a lot of which I've read is an indicator of a healthy ecosystem, is tachinid flies, and I've seen more chrysalises suffer from tachinid flies than OE. I actually saw one of the maggots coming out one day. I was like, holy cow. On that note, moths. Wait, yes, sir.
I'm full of questions.
Yeah, I love answering questions because I'm learning with you all. I just love that you guys are still here.
There are sporadic caterpillar invasions of the mountains, settled prominence, for example.
Mhm.
What causes them to collapse? Because they're not there every year, right? It's just a scarcity of food, or is there some kind of parasite that's attacking them, or what causes the collapse?
You know, that's a good question that I'm not sure about. I do know because I read a lot about spongy moths this season because I just couldn't believe how many there were. I've never seen that. And I read that the population is checked, but that basically, like where I live, the DEC recommends basically doing nothing because it's out of control, but that there's a parasite and then predators will get them. So I'm not sure, but maybe it's, if you see a drop, maybe it's related with the host plant. I'm actually,
Decline in host plant populations, it could be increase in predators, it could be
change in
wasps.
weather.
Yeah, changing weather, wasps figuring them out. Yeah, lots of wasps will lay their eggs in caterpillar eggs.
Yeah,
and the larvae.
and I'm wondering,
Which is way cool. Don't get me started on wasps.
oh, zombie.
Amazing.
Matthew is going to do a wasp talk during National Wasp Week, which we just founded.
Improv.
But you know, I actually wonder now that my brain's turning, what is left of my brain is turning about that question. I've noticed this season less rosy maples, rosy maple moths. And I wonder, like, we're having a much milder summer where I am, very rainy. So I wonder if it's climate change and weather too. I'm not sure.
In the case of what we used to call gypsy moths and probably now call them spongy moths, those have been studied longer than almost anything else. And one of my professors 100 years ago at UMass, who did his career on these, generally there's a 3-year buildup of those moths, those populations. You see the defoliation all over the mountains, and then they crash because of a virus. However, because as DEC said, if you spray for them, that 3 years ends up to 4 to 6 years.
What?
Because the virus only hits and is effective when the populations are high enough that they can get to each other. So the general answer is that, and in general, they don't have any real big negative effects on natural landscapes. They can kill trees on roadsides and yards because we've got herbicides and compaction and all that stuff. But in the wild, you lose a few trees, but it's not any big natural disaster at the moment. But there's others coming up that are really problematic. But I have another real question if we can get away from that.
Yeah.
So you're trying to be nice to people to teach them about weird things that are not very likable. When are you going to get to something really weird?
Really weird. I'm working on some stuff. You should see my work on the Hargila in India that lives in a trash pile. I just love, what would you say is really weird? Like, what would you like to see explored?
I think people need to hug the snakes more,
Oh, I love snakes.
and particularly what kind?
Well,
Rattlesnake.
see, that's interesting that you say that. I saw a rattlesnake last week. I live in a rattlesnake hotspot and they're beautiful. And where I live, it's interesting because on one side of town, they're gold, other side of town, they're black. And I will say, I've had to be pulled away. I'm lucky to know someone that works with rattlesnakes. And they end up in the area I am. Someone will be on their porch and there will be a rattlesnake. But I've had to be pulled away being this far with my camera laying down because they're the gentlemen of snakes. They don't want to do anything with you. The black rat snake will try to mess you up, but these rattlesnakes just want to be very cool. So
You're trying to tag them.
oh, do you tag rattlesnakes? Tom Tiny, we got to talk. That's cool.
They're easier to measure because they don't have as many legs as caterpillars.
Yeah, and do you find them to be the gentlemen of the snake world?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because like at first I was scared, but then I don't know, I have my rabies shots now. I have a lot of accidents. I'm actually getting over Lyme disease right now, so I'm really spacey, more spacey than usual. So I hope the presentation came across great, but I actually know where to get anti-venom in the area because I'm just waiting for that day. But I'm not scared of rattlesnakes. The only time I'm a little scared is walking through the woods where I live because my eyes haven't adjusted to see their patterning. So I also, like if I step over a log, I'll look because I like to really bushwhack and stuff like that. But there's a pretty significant population near me, so we should talk for sure. Husband, do you have any questions? Thank you for supporting my moth career. Let's hear it for my husband. Very patient man. And I just really want to thank Beat and you guys for coming. This means so much to me. And then I want to show you all Chelsea's t-shirt, which you can buy with the rosy mapes. Look at this, y'all. Get it on their website. And then also, this is a climbing moth ring. Not for sale. I had a moth t-shirt, but you know, I tried to follow Coco Chanel's advice that when accessories, you get dressed and then you remove one thing. So I just figured it would be a little too much. But get this shirt. And thanks, you guys. Happy National Moth Week.